let's start. We have the panelists that will be just joining a little bit later, but it's 8 o'clock, 4 o'clock in Peru, and we're very happy to be meeting with you again for this webinar funded by the Australian government and with our colleagues from Citrus and AGAP on sharing best practices in relation to training in the agricultural and horticultural sector. So last week provided us with an overview of the situation in the sector in both countries and the benefits of training to developing skills and skilled labor in this sector. And this week we'll go more in depth on looking at what kind of training would meet the needs of the sector, and also what trainers will be available to deliver and assess this training. So I will just mention some housekeeping rule before passing the floor to Sergio Castillo for some opening remarks. So please note that this webinar is being recorded. We will be sending you the recordings to the video at the end of the webinar for if you want to go back to it and find some more information. Please also note that the webinar provides interpretation. If you go down to the little sign on the bottom right, you can select your channel of preferred language, and we have 2 excellent interpreters available to facilitate the discussions. For our panelists, just be mindful of interpreters and please don't speak too fast, and also please speak as much as possible close to the microphone to make their job easier. Also, please keep muted if you're not speaking, and we will be calling for panelists session by session to put them video on as well, so that we have a little bit of a flow. I think that will be it. Let's start the discussions, and I'll pass the floor to Sergio. Please, Sergio, come forward.
Sí, muchas gracias, Eva, Craig, Paul, Camille, todos. Muchas gracias por este webinar. No hay duda que la educación y la formación técnica profesional juegan un rol fundamental en la transformación del sector agrícola de nuestro país. Un sector que es muy necesario para el desarrollo del país y de un gran número de trabajadores que dependen de este sector. Somos el mayor creador de mano de obra en el país, y asimismo somos los segundos mayores generadores de divisas para el país. Entonces va a ser muy necesario en los próximos años profesionalizar nuestra mano de obra y de esa manera ser más competitivos en el mundo. Por tanto, este webinar habla sobre eso, sobre la posibilidad que tenemos de transformar nuestra capacitación y educación para hacerla compatible con lo que el sector agrícola moderno está demandando. Nuevamente agradecer a TAFE, ¿no? Y a COALAR por la oportunidad que nos dan de estar con ustedes y de que podamos recibir o que nos puedan transmitir todo este conocimiento que ustedes tienen ya de varios años de haber llevado a cabo los consejos sectoriales en diferentes sectores. En particular el agrícola, que como digo es fundamental y es estratégico para nuestros países. Muchas gracias.
Sorry, thank you very much for these words and a reminder of the importance of our discussions today, particularly when rebuilding our economies after the shock that we had last year. And I would like now to open the first session and to call up first panelist, Paul McClure, who is a teacher of horticulture programs at Sunny TAFE. Sunny TAFE is the TAFE that is participating, has kindly accepted to participate with us in these webinars. So Paul, over to you, and if you could maybe quickly remind the speakers of Sunny TAFE at the beginning of your presentation. Thanks.
Thanks, Eva. I'll just share my screen.
Try now.
Yeah, thank you. How's that?
Yes, it works.
It's
Perfect.
good. Just right. I think we're right. How does that look, Eva?
Yes, perfect. Go on.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. And firstly, I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you about my experiences as a horticultural teacher at Sunny TAFE. I've been a teacher, Sunny TAFE, for nearly 16 years. And in that time, I've mostly taught groups, what we call Certificate 2, which is fairly basic training. Certificate 3, which is around the trade group, the people that do the work. Certificate 4, which is getting into the area of supervisors, and Certificate 5 or diploma. So in recent years, it's mostly been that diploma area. I'm located, or the teaching location, and I'm located at Sunny TAFE Farm, which we're on the premises of the farm property, which is a 21 hectare farm, fully irrigated, and has in excess of about 10 different crops growing and growing systems, so different types of trellis systems and growing systems. Focus of the farm primarily is a teaching resource. So it's an area specially planned and developed with teachers in mind, and we have quite a bit of input into that. Sunny TAFE Farm, one of the major focuses at the moment is innovation, and you'll see some pictures of drones. We also have a robot, which fairly new. The robot will be doing particular work, weeding, crop assessment. We're hoping to do some monitoring of diseases, pests and diseases like powdery mildew and botrytis and things like that. We also have modern irrigation scheduling equipment as well. All right, contextualizing and delivery of assessments is one of my main approaches, and I know a lot of the teachers, it's the first thing they think about. I think we take it for granted a little bit, but by contextualizing, we really mean making sure that the assessments and delivery are relevant to the student. So, and the students' basic workplace. So it's very similar type of assessments, which seem natural to the student because it's part of their workplace or industry that they're going to end up in. What we find that the benefits of doing that and it's a lot easier when you have the facility like we do with the farm. It gives us a better learning experience. It becomes very relevant to the student or the trainee. It helps with, excuse me, it helps, it helps a lot with retention and also keeping people engaged. So when people are engaged in the classroom, they learn. A lot of the other things that I try to do with other strategies is mix up the delivery. So we might have things like videos, role plays, excursions, etc. I find that all helps with keeping people engaged and listening. When people are listening, there's a good chance that they're learning. All right, just to cover a couple of the areas that I've been working with. So workplace training has been an area that that I've dealt with a fair bit along the way. And what I find with workplace training is that I think it has the most opportunity for success in regard to finding an employee some employment, permanent employment. So I think that's really, really important. The other thing that I find too is that I'm just, bear with me for a second. That the other type of training is classroom-based training where have students come into the classroom. A lot of that is based around the people coming in. They're usually people that are unemployed. So they come in full-time or part-time. When they come in full-time, you'll find that people are often found that they have struggled to find work because they've left the conventional school system early. So they have a bit of a, I suppose, a bit afraid of going into another school system. So it's really important for us to try and recognise that and build a relationship in the classroom where they can respect and trust our teaching and our ways. So we find that building that arrangement is very, very important early in the piece. Part-time, people who have part-time jobs might come in and do part-time training. They might come in for 1 day a week or 2 days a week, or even a little bit. Obviously, the downfall of that is that the qualification takes longer to actually finish. So if it's full-time, might be a year. If it's part-time, it might take 2 years or 3 years to complete. Okay, the value of industry people as teachers. Now, I see this as one of the major benefits of the vet sector and TAFE training is that the people that are recruited as teachers are actually the ones that work in the industry. So they're often people that have been in a particular industry for a long time, like myself. Nearly over 40 years in horticulture, in different roles in horticulture. So to have a person like myself as a teacher, it allows us as teachers to be able to train the student correctly, And we know what areas, we know what their career path's likely to be if they're doing a particular course. Or also the knowledge of how a horticultural business works. We have a very good knowledge of what the end product, where the student is heading, is going to end up. We also can teach horticulture through the experiences we've had. When you've had a long time in the industry, there's not a lot of things that you haven't experienced. And I talk about the day-to-day things like weather, storms, things like that that affect horticultural industries. Also, the other thing I found is that teachers from industry, and I know this for a fact, have great contacts and networks that they build up from the industry people. I'm doing work now with a couple of scientists who are retired, but they're world-renowned scientists in the area of powdery mildew or mildew in grapevines. So I can call on those resources to speak to my class, to have a field day, talk, webinar, etc., etc. So lots of contacts through your industry years can be a valuable resource in aiding with the experience of the students in the teaching class. Okay, just quickly in conclusion, what I've got here is that the vet training industry model has been around for a long time. From memory, about probably at least 40 years in Australia. And it has stood the test of time. It is slowly evolving as needs and industry changes, and also as the workforce changes. But it's quite robust. The system as a training system, I think, works really well, especially using industry people as teachers and trainers. I think that's one of the big keys, the big positives. Workplace training has great potential for preparing potential employees, generally because of the situation where a lot of the workplace training, the employees are being trained as they're being paid for those first 1 to 3 years. Usually it's about a 3-year period, 2 to 3 years. Quite often the retention, if that's a good match with the employer, and the employer and employee have the right commitment and attitude towards that program, generally that employee often picks up permanent employment in that business. And that's because they're learning the way that business runs, or that part of the industry runs. And contextualizing and flexibility in delivery and assessment, I think, is really, really important. Making sure that the material that you deliver is relevant and the student sees as relevant to the industry or their workplace. It's not easy in a lot of cases when you've got mixed classes, but generally it works pretty well. And having a resource like the farm is just a really fantastic way to set up the surrounds, the resources surrounding your teaching. So I'd just like to thank you for your time, and thank you again for the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Many thanks, Paul, for this this great presentation of this first session, which is focusing on the products and how to design and deliver products that would be indeed relevant and helpful for this sector. And your last concluding remarks, Paul, were a great segue to pass the floor to Craig Robertson to talk a little bit more about the underlying principles of the VET and the TAFE system, so of the training system in Australia. So I'll now pass the floor to Craig so that he can provide us a little bit more understanding of how the system works and the competency-based training that we believe is a very important factor in delivering relevant training. So without further ado, I'll ask Craig to put his video on and join me online on the screen.
Eva, I need you to be able to, when I try to put my screen on, it says you cannot start your video because your host has stopped it. Is there
Okay.
anything you have there?
Look, I've double checked. It seems like it's okay, but I do have your presentation. So if you would like me to, I can.
Yes. So,
you.
Yeah, how about if we do that? Thank you very much. So, apologies, folks, but it's probably best that you're not going to see my face. So, probably seen too much of it. But look, can I firstly say thanks very much to Paul, because he has really demonstrated in an incredibly practical way how sort of the competency-based system in Australia works. Now, it's not just competency by itself that makes it work, but it's got two other dimensions that Paul demonstrated beautifully. One is the practical nature of the training, the real hands-on nature of the training. And secondly, that I guess the blend between teaching and industry knowledge. And Paul was possibly too modest to be able to show that he's got deep industry experience, which is why then many industry players will come to him. So that's the real beauty of the competency system with the strong relationship with industry. I should also mention, to be able to place Sunny TAFE in the context of Australia. So I'm in Canberra, which is the capital of Australia. And if I was to drive to Mildura, it would be an 8-hour drive. So it is sort of on the corner of three of our states of New South Wales, Victoria, and South Australia, and often regarded as the sort of the wine growing region, but also the citrus growing region in Victoria, and more recently, the almond growing region. So thanks very much, Paul. I really appreciated hearing that. What I'm going to do now is to give you now a high-level view about how it sort of operates from a policy perspective in Australia. So thanks, Eva. So what we've got to think about in Australia is that we are a federated nation with each state and territory, and under the constitutional arrangement, states and territories carry responsibility for vocational education and training, just like school education. But Australia came together many years ago to agree to some national approaches. And when you think about Sunny TAFE, for example, where they are almost a border community, because they'll have, they're not far from South Australia, they're not far from New South Wales, and they're embedded in Victoria. You can imagine that they will be getting students from those three states. It would be terrible if they had to teach three different ways for those three sets of people. So that's one of the reasons why we have sort of national standards. We've realised, and I think it's similar to most countries now, that you can't rely upon acquiring some skills, leaving school, and then being right for life. You need to be able to learn throughout your life. And this sort of requires some flexibility. And the demonstration that Paul gave is that sometimes people can start at a Certificate 2, which is like a introduction to the industry, a Certificate 3, which is the main skilled operators in a particular industry, or a Certificate 4 if you move into a supervisory role. And if you go to a diploma level, you are really looking at oversight, design of new production processes, and the like. And that's the reason why the Australian TVET system is so diverse and is based on standards, so that many of these requirements can be met. Well, whether it's a full course or a full qualification, or a short skill set, or even some non-accredited training, which can occur as well. Thanks, Eva. So let's talk about the competency-based approach. And Paul was right. It's about 40 years that we've had this model in Australia. It started in the late 1980s. And it started in the late 1980s because there was concern that too many institutes were too focused on curriculum, and graduates really didn't have enough background knowledge and the skills to be effective when they got into a workplace. So what we really need to do is to make sure that the conversion from graduation to work was smoother. And so what do we mean by competency? Often we think about competency as the outcomes expected from skills and learning intervention, but competencies reflect the skills, knowledge, and attitudes required to be effective in an occupation. As I said, it was introduced in the 1980s, and it's really geared towards the attainment and demonstration of skills to meet industry-defined standards. As Paul demonstrated, particularly on the farm that's at Sunny TAFE, many of the learning exercises and the assessment exercises simulate or very close to work situations. And so you can be assured that someone who's graduating understands the workplace, the work culture, and the work production process. So it really does help that smooth passage between graduation and work. And competency includes all aspects of the work or an occupation. It sort of looks at the skills to perform all the different tasks of a job. It seeks to give you understanding of how to deal with tasks in extenuating circumstances. It allows you to respond to problems and unexpected and non-routine events. For example, Paul talked about invasion of mildew. What do you do in those situations when your production process is disrupted? And dealing with all aspects of the workplace. And often that's around working with others, but also working safely. Thanks, Eva. Now, in Australia, we've worked hard to make our qualifications national in national in application. So what that means is, for example, if Sunny TAFE trained and graduated a Certificate 3 operator in Mildura, that Certificate 3 operator could go and work in any other part of Australia with that qualification recognised by employers. There might need to be some additional training on the job to understand how a new employer operates, but the qualification, they wouldn't need to do further formal education to sort of complement that qualification. What we end up happening in order to do that, and because it's such strongly aligned with industry, we have quite elaborate national processes of employers and unions for each industry sector, and based on their experience and understanding of the attributes of the occupation within their industry, they define the competency standards. And they live in some elaborate documents called training packages. Maybe later on we could talk through how you could access those and have a look at sort of how they work. Then to be able to make sure that the qualifications are relevant, that they sort of meet industry needs, they look to the future, but also make sure that there is good quality dimensions to it, such as the skills required and the knowledge required. They are endorsed by a national committee. And once they're endorsed by a national committee, an institution such as Sunny TAFE would pick them up and say, here's how we would now create a course to deliver against that, or indeed adapt a current course to deliver that qualification. Industry, of course, also continues to provide broader feedback at the national level, where, for example, they'd be saying, here are the trends that are happening in our industry, and here's how skills need to keep up to date with it. You would have seen the footage of the drone, or the picture of the drone on the Sunny Farm. They are examples of how technology is coming to the fore in terms of keeping an eye on what's going on with the property. One of the other big issues in Australia is our scarce water. So there is lots of technology playing a part in better use, or better and more efficient use of our scarce water, such as through electronic facilitated irrigation and the like. Thanks, Eva. What I've tried to do is to demonstrate this in this diagram. And if we start from the left, essentially what happens in Australia is our qualifications are framed by the needs of the occupation for that industry. And in your industry, for example, you would have a range of occupations at different levels. And so you could think about it this way as well. Then we define these notions called competencies. And generally they cover 3 elements that really make a person successful and effective in that occupation. It's the technical skills. And as I mentioned earlier on, it's the ability of working with others and to work in a team. And clearly it's the ability to work safely. Generally, those 3 elements are bundled together so that you're training somebody to be effective for that occupation, almost virtually from day one, although sometimes that can be difficult. That work there is done by industry experts who come and define those competencies. So once that set of competencies is defined, it is then converted across to the delivery side, such as Sunny TAFE, and they will look at the skills and knowledge that are required. They'll try to contextualise that to the particular industries that they are serving. And they'll do that through course design to suit the certain circumstances. For example, it may not be appropriate to do some particular elements that may relate to citrus growing as opposed to grapes, etc. But that's a decision that a knowledgeable trainer, someone such as Paul, would make, depending upon the context and the clients with whom he's serving. And then a key part of that is what's the assessment that needs to be done so that employers would have confidence that a graduate of this particular program understands and has the right level of skills for that particular occupation. And Paul made a very important point earlier on about the real magic is this is done by trainers that are dual qualified. They have a qualification in training and assessment, but equally they're very experienced in the industry themselves. They need to be able to maintain or demonstrate their industry currency. Now, because this can be quite modular, you can deliver a full qualification or you can deliver part qualification. Our preference, of course, is for the full qualification to be delivered because you'll learn the full suite of things you need to be effective. But it may be that for particular circumstances, for particular industries even, you may only need to do 2 or 3 parts of that. Interestingly, in Australia, if only a part qualification is done, even those part qualifications are recognised formally and completely across Australia. Thanks, Eva. So I'm just summarising some other particular elements that I've already spoken about. So CBT courses do not prescribe how people should be trained. Trainers use them to design learning programs that assist people to gain or demonstrate that they possess the skills and knowledge specified in units of competency. They are outcomes focused. It's the teacher who has the responsibility for designing the course and developing a curriculum and designing learning experiences and assessment experiences, all aimed at achieving the outcomes specified in that competency. And it involves, as Paul demonstrated, a mix of practical learning and sometimes work-based learning as well. And therefore, it means it can be flexible and delivered in different contexts. It is feasible, for example, and this could apply in your situation, that all the learning could take place in the workplace. And in fact, the course could be structured in that way, and the trainer would come either on occasion or in blocks and come out and do training in the work context. We have a situation in Australia where we're a large country. In square kilometre terms, we're the 6th largest country in the world, but we've got populations that are quite dispersed. And so sometimes it's difficult for some students to come to an institution. Sometimes it's easier if the provider or the trainer goes out to a particular business. And so that's why we've worked quite hard on having this modular standards-based system. Thanks, Eva. Then assessment then becomes quite important, because if you are saying there are many different ways to learn, different contexts and modes by which you learn, and in fact, people come with different backgrounds and different levels of skills anyway, the real quality dimension plays out when we come to assessment. And that competency-based assessment is not only understanding what people know and testing what people know, but also collecting evidence about what they can do practically in relation to those particular skills. So in Paul's case, I would imagine they would be, and I'm now going to demonstrate my complete lack of knowledge of the agricultural sector, but Paul's graduates would be very good in relation to looking after the full cycle of growing for grapevines, etc., the horticulture, etc., those particular elements. Now, the important thing to bear in mind is this is a criterion referenced system. And what we mean by that is once you have demonstrated your ability to do those particular tasks and demonstrate that knowledge, you're assessed as competent and you can get your qualification. It's not a comparative system, so you don't get a grading from A, B, C, D, E. And as we said earlier on, Australian trainers are required to undertake a pedagogy course, what we call Certificate 4 in Training and Assessment, to master both teaching and assessment skills. Thanks, Eva. There we go. So that was a sort of a national picture. Now that's how we apply it across our states and territories and across government. But there is nothing stopping the citrus industry, for example, to say we want to develop our own set of standards. And the way that would work for you is it would be you could have staff move across employers, and you could generally increase the skill level of the workforce serving your industries. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Craig. And so indeed, what we just presented of the Australian system and accredited courses would also be relevant for shorter courses or upskilling of professionals in the industry. So the competency-based model is pretty universal. It's used in many systems, and I assume that many of you are familiar. But if you have any questions for Craig or for Paul, now you're welcome to ask your questions now. So I would like to invite a facilitator from ProCitrus to join me in this Q&A session and see if there are any questions.
Buenos días. Sí, bueno, una pregunta que tenemos es digamos, la institución o la persona que entrena al que se va a capacitar, el que acredita, el que certifica y el que evalúa, ¿cómo se relacionan? ¿Puede ser la misma persona? ¿Son personas distintas? ¿Son instituciones diferentes?
So please, Paul or Craig, and if you could maybe just also join us by video or at least respond. Paul, would you like to respond to this?
Thanks, Eva. If I understand the question correctly, certainly in my experiences, the person who does the assessing is the person who gives the final qualification, but not necessarily. It could be different teachers that do different parts. So in our case, we have different teachers who are specialists in the different subjects that make up the course. But generally, at the end of the day, we are the ones that decide whether that particular employee is competent or not. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And I'll come in as well. And so you might be trying to compare Australia to the English system. So, for example, in England, you will go to somebody else to be assessed, somebody separate from the training organisation. But Paul is correct here in Australia that it would be the person who is, or it would be the institution that has responsibility for assessing and issuing the qualification. Now, as Paul said, within a big institution like SUNY, it could be the trainer, him or herself, who does the assessment, or equally, it could be somebody else from within the institution who comes in and does the assessment. One of the key attributes that make sure that assessment is high quality is there's a requirement on each institution in Australia, I think on a 5-year cycle, to have all of their assessment processes sort of independently validated across the institution or with another institution. So that makes sure that assessment remains contemporary, but equally is fair and just in terms of assessing the competencies of an individual.
Okay. Una segunda pregunta es, ¿la calificación final la da también el mismo centro de trabajo? ¿O es una institución externa?
It's granted by the institution. So in this case, it would be granted. So a testament that would be issued by SUNY TAFE would be issued by SUNY TAFE. But because it's a nationally endorsed qualification, and it says Certificate 3 in horticulture or something or other like that, it's recognised by the industry. In some cases, we do have industry-specific certifications. Excuse me. But they're often outside of the formal training system in Australia.
Bueno, no hay más preguntas.
Okay. Great. And so we will send some additional material. Craig was mentioning some examples of content of training packages for you to have a look at. So we will provide the link to that. And we are also developing a short video to help everyone understand the Australian system a little bit better. So that's also something that we will be circulating to the participants to help understand where we're coming from and what the system looks like. So thanks very much for Paul and Craig for this first session, and we can move on to the next session, which will focus now more. We have touched on trainers already, but the second session will look a little bit more at the profiles and the attributes of trainers who would be optimal to give to deliver this competency-based training. So I would like to invite our two next speakers to join us. So Lara Collins is the coordinator of training and evaluation programs at SUNYTAFE, and she will be talking to us about the trainer profile. And yes, hopefully the video, the sharing of your power presentation will work. So just let me know and I'll give you the floor.
Great, thank you for that. Yeah, again, thank you for the opportunity to share some information with you today about the ideal trainer profile, particularly what we look for in our trainers and assessors in the vocational setting here in Australia. So being the ideal trainer in the vet sector it means that you're a person who's able to help others and to share the skills and knowledge that you bring from your vocation into the classroom. So it's about teaching the learners the correct and the appropriate techniques to do a particular job in the workplace with professionalism and with skill. So what molds that is our experience in our industry, our knowledge, the base that we have in our vocation, that we can then share that with our students. So it does take a particular set of skills and qualifications to be able to perform that task. There needs to be a passion to share your knowledge with others to become an effective trainer. So some questions we do ask ourselves, and we do ask trainers coming into the industry, these simple questions just to profile and to see if they are the right fit for the vocational setting. So first of all, we do look for the relevant skills and experience in their area of expertise. So obviously we do want somebody in that trainer position that has a vast experience in their vocation, whether it be teaching in business, whether it's horticulture, in any of the range of qualifications and training packages delivered in the vocational setting. What we also look for is some formal qualification to support that profession. So we want to determine that the teachers, the trainers and assessors that we are employing in the vet sector have the necessary and required skills to be able to share that with the student. And they also need to be willing to share that skills and knowledge. So they need to have a desire to help others and to share that information with their students. So I've just noticed something's come up in the chat there. Is that anything? Can everyone hear me okay? Is that?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yep. Sorry, that's okay. So the next step we would look at is what field can you actually train in? So again, and I think this has been a common theme through the presentations this morning about this just highlights that we are looking for people that have a number of years experience in that vocation, in that area of expertise, that they can then share that under the training banner. So realistically, when you're qualified in that area, that makes you a successful trainer, and it makes your job as that trainer a lot easier to do, because you're sharing what it is that you're skilled in and experienced in. Just to build on some of the information that Craig shared before about the vocational setting, and this is just a little snapshot of the variety of industries that we have in the vocational setting. So there's 56 different training packages. So that's 56 different areas of specialised skills. And then drilling down from that, there are over 1,200 different qualifications that are nationally recognised. And that's where, obviously, when we're looking for our ideal trainer, that drills down into those 1,200 different qualifications is where we're looking for the specialist and the expertise within those vocations. Again, it was touched on in Craig's presentation that our governing body, which is ASQA, the Australian Skills and Quality Authority, have some guidelines around what it takes to be a vocational trainer and assessor, and that is that they must hold the qualification, which is known as our Certificate 4 or in Training and Assessment, or a qualification above that. That looks at training and assessment practices for the adult learner. Some other requirements are that their background and experience needs to reflect what is current industry practice. And then they need to make sure that the assessments are valid for industry as well. As a trainer and assessor, they must also have current skills in that industry also. So it can't be that they've been practicing in that area 10 years ago. It needs to be current, and currency will vary from training package to training package. As we know, things change in sectors very quickly. So we need to make sure that our trainers are up to date with the current skills and current knowledge in those training package areas. So where I'll probably spend a little bit of time just talking about the next couple of slides here is about what makes a learner-centred trainer and assessor unique to the vet sector. So when we look at some of the vocational pedagogy, we look at some different dimensions. So the first thing we look at is how we form the vocational identity. So that is, how do we demonstrate the skills and knowledge that are connected with that development of the skills and knowledge and the attitude in that associated vocational occupation. So we need to have, under those training packages and the different qualifications, we need to really make sure that we have a very good understanding of what's required in the workplace, and make sure we can link that in forming the identity of the vocational skills. We need to make sure then the authenticity of the tasks are relevant in that workplace. So in ensuring we're delivering a learner-centred approach, we need to make sure that the learning activities are what's actually required in the workplace, so that when the students complete their qualification and they are performing in the workplace, the tasks are what's expected. If obviously there are some barriers in terms of actually accessing a real life workplace and real life work situations, we need to make those tasks as realistic as possible. And that's where there might be simulated workplaces, or obviously like what we have here at Sunny TAFE, where we have our Sunny TAFE farm, which is a fantastic opportunity for our students to work in the horticulture field. We then need to make sure that we can reconcile the subject-orientated and the thematic material. So what that means is that we need to make sure that any of the learning experiences are learned to, again, that vocation and those outcomes. We need to also make sure that the theoretical component is applied in the practical tasks. So what we want to see is that the learner knows why they're doing the task when they're performing it. So it's not just that they can perform the task, but they understand why. They can undertake problem solving practices if required, and they actually have an idea of the entire process, not just going in and performing the task required. We also need to make sure that they can formulate their own problem solving and solutions for any and contingency management plans for issues that arise in workplace tasks. The next dimensions then look at how the teacher can actually mould their training. So we need to be adaptive in instruction and our modelling. So what this means is that we need to be able to make sure that we can change our delivery or our assessment techniques and processes to support the learner so that we can start progressively reducing the amount of support that's required of the student. So the aim is obviously for our students to be autonomous and working through and completing the tasks on their own. So as a teacher, we need to make sure that we can adapt those techniques and identify when our students are at different learning points and adjust our learning to suit their needs. We need to make sure we can coach our students and make them become self-directed. We need to guide them through the learning and show them how they need to, what they need to learn and how they can progress. But we need to make sure that they can manage their own, learning and can also direct their skills and knowledge to the applied tasks, which that leads to the next development of self-directed learning. We really need to make sure that they develop good self-management skills and organisational skills. Not only are they required in the workplace, but they're definitely a key part of the vocational training and assessment practices to ensure that they can complete all the tasks required. And the last point we look at here in these dimensions is the development of reflection. So through reflecting on the learning and the workplace experience, students will just develop the autonomy and the expertise and the routine to be able to perform tasks in the workplace, and obviously then to improve processes and improve their own performance. So what we look at is how they perform tasks. We ask them to, what did they do well? What could you do better, and what could you change? So that they're considering a range of different options to improve their own performance. So a big thing in the vet sector is about practical skills. So the big part here is that we really need to get our learners involved in practical tasks, understanding how they perform the tasks, and that's how they'll learn. So thank you for your time this morning, and if there are any questions, obviously there will be a time soon to ask.
Wonderful, thanks very much, Lara. And I really enjoyed the last quotation about supporting learners, and I think it's really good. So yes, we will have a Q&A session after the next presentation. I see that you do have some questions already. So we look forward to that. And also just to remind that we're talking about the Australian experience, but it's all a comparative, exercise as well for us to, for you to see how it works, but how you could take some of the elements, not necessarily everything, into your practice and how we could help with that. So I have been told that Samantha is a little bit unwell today, so I'm very sorry to hear that you do have some cough, and if you're unable to speak, maybe we'll just give you time to recover put you on mute and take a few questions. And thanks very much for, making yourself available despite you being unwell. And lucky that we don't have COVID in Australia at the moment, and that you can be in the workplace without too much, concerns. So Sarah Hilliard is the Education Development Advisor at Sunny TAFE, and she will be our last speaker for the day. And she will talk about how to build trainer capability, how to support trainers to develop all these skills that we've been talking about. So over to you, Samantha, and hopefully you'll be well. Thanks.
Thank you, Eva, and also thank you to TAFE Directors Australia for inviting us to speak here today. Just share my presentation. I will be talking to you today about building trainer capability for the TAFE sector. And it's important to recognise that when we're talking about building trainer capability, what we're talking about is maintaining our trainers' vocational competency. So that's maintaining their ability to deliver to our students using their vocational skills and knowledge of their industry. As mentioned previously by Lara, prior to entering the TAFE sector to train, you will be required to do a training and assessment course, and also mentioned by Craig. In addition to that, to maintain your vocational competency, you must hold the qualification and units that you're going to be delivering in the training. If you don't hold those qualifications and units, you must prove that you can demonstrate equivalent competency for those units that you're delivering. Now, in the TAFE sector, we have a thing called recognised prior learning. And it is possible for people from industry, when they enter our workforce, to do recognised prior learning. And recognised prior learning acknowledges the skills and knowledge that they've had in industry. It looks at the units they need to deliver, and we can recognise those units towards a qualification. In addition, they can do some training in that area. Also, part of vocational competency is maintaining your industry skills and knowledge. Now, to maintain your industry skills and knowledge while you're teaching, you must be able to, they must be gathered through industry engagement activities. And I'll go on and talk about what some of those activities are in industry. And they must meet any specific requirements of the training package or course. So that might be licensing requirements, for example, in plumbing. We also have a certificate requirement in chemical application in Victoria, where users of restricted chemicals must have a license. So that could be part of the requirement in the package or course. At Sunny TAFE, to make sure that we maintain our teachers' current industry skills, we do a review of their industry skills whenever we develop a new training and assessment strategy. So that's the plan of how we're going to deliver a course and what assessment tools and strategies we're going to use to deliver that course. And as Paul mentioned, that can be contextualised to different students, student client groups, and things like that. So it could vary quite a bit. Or at a minimum, we look at their competencies annually and make sure that they're current. So one of the industry engagement activities that we can do is maintaining our work skills. So we can do this by concurrently working in industry. Myself, I owned a wine grape property for 12 years. And while I was teaching production horticulture and agribusiness, I worked on my own property and I maintained my practical skills by running that property in addition to my teaching. If you don't have access to a property, so you don't have one that you can work on, you can put yourself into industry placement, where you can go out and work in industry. So you could go out and work in a horticulture property that you don't necessarily own. We're very lucky at Sunny TAFE because we have the TAFE farm, and our teachers have access to go and maintain their practical skills on that farm. So they can do their work placement, in this case, actually on our TAFE farm. And that TAFE farm has a huge variety of crops and, you know, new technologies and stuff like that. So that helps maintain our teachers' capabilities. The other option is you could do work shadowing. So work shadowing would be you go out to a workplace and just shadow or work with someone, follow someone around and watch what they do in the workplace. And that's really appropriate where it might be a processing plant, something like that, so dried fruit processing plant. You could go out for a day and you know, shadow someone and watch how that processing plant operates. The other types of industry engagement activities that we do are professional development. So with professional development, this can mean attending conferences. It can mean attending professional workshops. Now, this may be in teaching skills, but also industry skills. So either of those is fine. You can go to industry-run conferences or as I said, teaching conferences. You can go away and do a short course, maybe an accredited short course. When I used to teach the chemical application course, and we had an annual conference that we had to attend as part of our requirements to deliver that course. And that was a 2-day conference where we were updated on chemical application techniques and new technologies and appropriate training for the delivery of chemical application in the horticulture industry. You can also, and that was a certificate we were required by that industry to do that and maintain that qualification while we delivered that. The pictures here you'll see is a Sunny TAFE Professional Development Day. This was a day where we get all our teachers together. As part of my role in education development, we organise an annual conference for our teachers, sometimes biannually, where we update their skills in teaching, and we do that internally, but you can also do external training. The other type of training you might do forklift training, you might do 10-8 training. As part of our employment requirements here at Sunny TAFE, we are required to do 30 hours a year of this type of professional development, and that's a minimum of 30 hours a year. So it is something that we schedule into our workload and we ensure that we do it. Some other industry engagement activities, we can network. So we can network with industry mentors, we can network with our employers, our students' employers, we can network with other training organisations, so other TAFEs within Victoria or private registered training organisations. We can network with our students and find out what they're doing in their workplaces. And we can do industry visits as well. When I delivered our production horticulture course, I would, at a minimum, once a year, do industry tour with our students, and we would go to industries that they really hadn't been exposed to. We've got some fabulous industries in our region. We have the largest almond production in Australia. We have citrus, we have olives, dried fruit, avocados, pistachios, and one of the largest carrot producers in the Southern Hemisphere. So we have plenty of opportunities in our region to go out and do industry tours and study tours. And when we do that, we endeavour to focus on industries that have got new developments occurring, new technologies, as you can see here in the image, the robot or robotics in farming, and those types of things. We also maintain our conversations with our employers. It's a requirement that we talk to them and discuss the training delivery of our programs with our employers on a regular basis and get their feedback. And it's actually a requirement that that feedback is implemented or put into our training programs, our course design. So that's part of the process of our course design. The other things that we can do some personal self-development. So that's just maintaining, doing some private research on new technologies. So, you know, spray technologies or robotic technologies, that type of thing. So you do some personal research. You could also apply and go and do some fellowships or scholarships. In Victoria, we have TAFE or vocational fellowships where teachers can go and do additional training in education with those fellowships. And we also have international specialised skills fellowships as well, where if we've got an industry with some new skills where we need to upskill or learn some new skills that we don't currently have in our sector, we can look at an international fellowship where we go and investigate and report back on some of those technologies overseas or skills from overseas. And finally, our last method of industry engagement is through membership. So in this case, we make sure that we were members within our industry sector, professional associations, so people like Citrus Australia, AgriFutures Australia, National Vegetable Extension Network. There's all sorts of different industry groups that you can become a member of. So we would join those and keep ourselves informed of what's happening in those industries, and subscribing to professional journals and publications as well. So things like New South Wales Department of Primary Industries, they have All the Dirt newsletter. They do Vine Watch as well, newsletters, and National Vegetables, they do Growing Veg, and Citrus Australia does Citrus News. So you would subscribe to those journals and publications and maintain your knowledge of those sectors by being part of that. So that's just some examples of the industry engagement activities that we do. As I mentioned previously, this is ongoing commitment. We would be looking at our skills and ensuring they're up to date each time we did a new training and assessment strategy. And if that didn't happen annually, we'd be checking our skills and knowledge and professional development annually. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Samantha. That was really interesting, and I hope it gives ideas as well, and to our Peruvian friends. So we have now time for some questions and answers. So Enzo, thanks for joining us again. If you could, so reminding you of the interpretation facility as well. Yes, please go forward. Please, Enzo, you're welcome to ask the questions from the participants.
Sí. Bueno, tenemos... Correcto, sí. La siguiente pregunta que tenemos es respecto a los entrenadores. ¿cómo consiguen reclutar a los expertos de la industria para que ellos sean entrenadores? ¿Cómo los califican? ¿Qué incentivos hay, considerando que si ellos dedican tiempo al entrenamiento, están paralelamente trabajando o no en la industria? Esa sería la primera pregunta.
So I can answer that. So as a full-time trainer and assessor, as Sam highlighted, there is still a requirement to be engaged in industry. However, in I suppose my package, I have a large amount of time that I am allocated to re-engage with my industry. That will obviously differ for different industry areas, where sometimes trainers will be more on a part-time basis. So they are working in industry as well as teaching.
Just checking the interpretation. I think I can hear
the other thing to probably add is about the remuneration. And for a qualified teacher, the pays are generally quite comparable with what you would be earning in industry, if not above those wages. So there is obviously you are remunerated for the skills that you bring into the training environment.
Samantha, do you want to add to it?
¿El servicio brindado por TAFE es para personas naturales o es también para empresas, buscando la certificación del personal de las empresas?
Yes, so we offer both. So we have a large number of what we call our public delivery classes. So that's where our learners will come from a variety of different areas. But we do also have corporate programs, and we do run a number of different programs across all of our training packages and qualifications, specifically to industry. And they're then actually tailored to meet that industry's requirements. So if we were delivering to one organisation, for example, we would actually make our learning in that context. So we would refer to their policies, their procedures, as long as that aligned to our national framework.
Okay. Una tercera pregunta, no sé si todavía tenemos tiempo, creo que todavía. Los actuales tiempos, los actuales cambios que han habido en los entornos remotos o virtuales a través de las plataformas, estas virtuales, digamos, solicitan nuevas habilidades para los entrenadores, digamos, en el tema de poder llegar al educando a través de simplemente de plataformas virtuales, por ejemplo.
Yes, absolutely. So with the last 12 months has been a massive change for all of our trainers and assessors. And fortunately, because of our location, we have actually been, some of our courses have been delivered in that online environment for some time. However, a large majority weren't. And Sam, as part of the Education Development Services team, we had a team of qualified designers actually design programs to teach our teachers how to move into that online space. So there was a lot of time and a lot of support for a number of different teachers to introduce different technology and different platforms to be able to engage with our students in the online environment. And Sam, if you're able to, you want to add to that, I think that it has actually worked quite successfully in a number of our programs where we're now finding that we're engaging with students from a wider area rather than just our local area now, because online is really removing some of those barriers of having to do face-to-face classroom learning, and a lot of people are actually embracing the online environment.
I will jump in, Lara, and yes, totally agree. Our teachers here have taken to the online environment majority with open arms and have really had some positive comments with being able to reach, particularly in our horticulture industries, they're remote students, so they do travel in from quite some distance when they used to come to campus to do training. So now we can reduce that travelling time, we can do theory to them remotely. The reality is we could actually get video cameras and stuff like that, and we could do, you know, some practical or demonstrate some practical stuff out in the field as well. So, you know, it's opened up a world of possibilities for delivering our training anywhere. Yeah. So it's been, to me, it's been a really exciting last 12 months. Got to take something positive out of COVID, but been fantastic.
Hay uso de, digamos, allá para capacitar, ustedes utilizan también simuladores.
Absolutely. So in some training packages, especially where, you know, it's high risk, there are definitely workplace simulations that need to be put in place because of obviously the nature of the practice. So especially in our licensed trades, but there's a lot of other training packages where there's no opportunity to practice some of the high risk skills. So workplace simulations and different equipment to support that are definitely engaged.
I'll add that to that again. I do know in horticulture, particularly for one industry, they've been using virtual reality goggles and doing their workplace inductions using virtual reality. So that's been very exciting technology, and it's currently being used.
¿Solo para la capacitación o también para evaluar?
Absolutely both, in both areas.
Ok. Yo tengo una pregunta más. Y digamos, ¿cómo asegurar que la persona que se capacita continúe su educación? Digamos, ¿el porcentaje de ausentismo es alto, bajo, medio? ¿Qué nos puedes comentar?
So it depends whether the student enters the course. So Craig before touched a little bit on the qualification framework and the different levels. So we start at what we call pre-vocational and the certificate 1, where it is really introduction to the work skills. We do find when our students commence at the lower levels, so what we call the certificate 1 and certificate 2 levels, there's generally progression into the higher qualifications until they get to the workplace application that they're comfortable with. So if we follow the theory that the certificate 2 or 3 is still working under some supervision, if they aspire to some management or leadership roles, then they'll continue through the qualification framework until they get to maybe the qualification level that's suited for the job type. There's also progression from the vocational courses into higher ed, into the university degrees as well. So there's a lot of different qualifications that have pathways to further education. And it is that lifelong learning journey. It's not just you do one qualification and that's it. It is generally, there's generally pathways to further learning.
Bueno, tenemos una última pregunta, si tenemos un espacio todavía, es la certificación que se brinda en Australia para los entrenadores, ¿es del Estado o del sector privado? ¿No? Es decir, o sea, si hay que seguir un curso fuera de ser el experto, hay que seguir un curso para ser entrenador dentro del, o sea, alguien que te certifique como entrenador.
Yeah, absolutely. So I deliver the qualifications at what we call our entry level to become a trainer and assessor in the vocational setting Australia-wide is the Certificate for Training and Assessment. But for me to teach that, I actually need to be certified at a higher level. Our standards dictate as to what qualifications I must have. And they tell us that I have to have at least a diploma in vocational training and education and training to be able to deliver to the certificate for students. So the Certificate for in Training and Assessment program itself is audited very heavily. And I think Craig may have mentioned before about external, what we call external validation. So that means that our course actually needs to be approved, and somebody external from our organisation needs to basically audit that course to make sure that it is compliant and meeting the standards, so that then our students exiting the course have the required skills to be able to start as a trainer and assessor. So there is quite a stringent audit process around the teaching qualification itself. And there are some very strict standards about who can actually deliver the program itself as well.
And maybe if I can jump in there as well. So the Certificate for in Training and Assessment, we call it the TAE, is indeed a feature of the Australian system. So you have to have this qualification as an accredited course. So it's the government who recognizes it to be able to deliver that. And many countries are interested in that format because it mixes industry experience and competency and pedagogy, so how to do competency-based training. So TAFEs have worked with many countries on training their trainers. Lara said that we actually maybe in Australia have done a little bit too much, and now the audit levels of the TAE are so high that it is becoming difficult to deliver it to offshore, so international audiences. But a new program has been developed specifically for international participants. It is called the IST, or International Skills Training, and it summarizes kind of the highlights and the main points of the Australian course in a shorter way. It is delivered, it can be delivered online, and it has been delivered online because a lot of the countries we've been working with have used the lockdowns to upskill their trainers' skills. So we have, our TAFEs have done a lot of work, and Sunny TAFE is one of the TAFEs who've delivered that international TAE, if we can call it that way. So we can send some information on that as well. So it is a very high level in Australia, but we have developed now a program for international audiences that don't have the same level of audited and compliance, but still keep the essence of what we're trying to, present to you today.
Ok, de acuerdo, sí, justamente tenemos la opinión de Sergio de estamos interesados en ese curso, ¿no? Bueno, no tengo más preguntas en el chat. Ni tampoco en los comentarios.
Great. Wonderful. Well, thanks very much for Lara and Samantha for this very interesting session. I hope that it has given you some ideas for your sector. And let's go into a group discussion. So I'd like to invite all panelists to join us online, and maybe that will be also a photo opportunity so that we can document it, our interaction. So please, to all panelists and speakers from before to join us. So look, it's we would like to get your feedback, Sergio, Enzo, Gennaro, sorry, on what you've heard already, maybe some feedback on what you're doing at the moment, and where do you think some compatibilities or some areas that where Australian TAFEs might be able to help? And I'll just throw some ideas of what TAFEs are doing internationally to give you some suggestions. So I was just talking about Train the Trainer, so the ISD, but also we have been working a lot with countries on online teacher development, professional development, because it is a very specific skill set that many teachers didn't have, and they were pretty nervous or, you know, needed some support at the beginning. So particularly in I understand that Peru is lockdown in lockdown, or has, you know, a very serious COVID situation, and you might want to look into that. Other areas that TAFE have worked with partners internationally is on course development and supporting, you know, in coming up with some courses that would be relevant to the labor market. But also we have done a lot of study tours, people coming to see how things are done in Australia. Maybe this cannot be done just now because the borders are closed in Australia, but hopefully we'll get out of this situation at some point. In the meantime, we have actually developed some virtual study tours as well, and some online activities with our international partners. So just some ideas there, but we really are interested in hearing from you on what you've heard today and how that relates to work you're doing at the moment. Thanks.
Sí, puedo hablar, ¿no es cierto? Sí, yo quería comentar, bueno, en Perú estamos muy interesados por todo este desarrollo que han tenido en Australia, porque nosotros estamos con toda la voluntad de implementar un sistema similar en Perú. Hemos trabajado ya con nuestras autoridades y con el Banco Interamericano, y lo dijo Gabriel Amaro en el webinar anterior. Tenemos, digamos, ya un trayecto recorrido con todo el tema de las normas. Hemos identificado las principales funciones en la producción agrícola. No tenemos un instituto como tiene Australia, pero no quiere decir que no lo podamos tener en el futuro. Sí tenemos convenios con universidades y tenemos centros de investigación nacionales e internacionales con los cuales podemos trabajar. En ProCitrus y en AGAP, ya hace muchos años nosotros hacemos entrenamiento en el campo, ¿no? No hemos hecho entrenamiento, digamos, el tradicional que se hace en una clase, ¿no? En una habitación cerrada. Siempre nuestros entrenamientos han sido en el campo, viendo los problemas ahí y dándole soluciones a los problemas en el campo. Se evalúa también al trabajador. Todas las empresas tienen un sistema de evaluación, pero no es un sistema estandarizado. No hay una estandarización en todos los procesos y en las buenas prácticas. Entonces, yo creo que este sistema va a ayudar mucho a poder, primero, identificar quiénes son los expertos en la industria, a los cuales podremos utilizar como entrenadores, pero que posiblemente no tengan las capacidades o las competencias pedagógicas que, por ejemplo, el sistema australiano demanda de los entrenadores. Sin embargo, podemos también implementar eso con nuestras autoridades para que estos entrenadores tengan ese soporte pedagógico que se necesita para poder dar una capacitación, un entrenamiento a estudiantes o a personas que ya no son estudiantes, que son trabajadores, ¿no? Que ya terminaron de estudiar, que han comenzado a trabajar, pero que igual necesitan reforzar ciertos aprendizajes para poder llegar, digamos, al estándar que requiere la industria. Entonces, hay un gran trabajo por hacer acá. Nos interesa muchísimo toda esta experiencia que tiene Australia. Siempre ha sido nuestro referente desde que comenzamos a participar en esto. Se mencionó antes cómo funciona en Inglaterra, y sabemos que es así, pero creo que nosotros estamos más orientados a un sistema como el australiano, ¿no? Donde está integrado todo el tema del entrenamiento, la evaluación, que es el assessment, y finalmente la cualificación, ¿no? La calificación final que obtiene la persona y que le permita ser más empleable en el mercado, ¿no? Porque eso finalmente tenemos que decir que ¿para qué queremos todo esto? Todo esto lo queremos para que tengamos en el mercado gente entrenada y que tenga, digamos, la posibilidad de conseguir trabajo más rápidamente por sus competencias. De eso se trata este sistema. Entonces, tenemos mucho personal hoy día que está capacitado, pero no está reconocido con un certificado sus competencias. Entonces, hay un gran trabajo por hacer en poder identificar, digamos, de la gente que ya trabaja, quienes tienen realmente las competencias adecuadas y igualmente identificar a quién necesitamos entrenar para que pueda lograr las competencias necesarias y pueda estar al nivel de sus compañeros, ¿no? Es algo que es el reto que tenemos por adelante y que los empleadores, es decir, la industria, nos ha confiado que desarrollemos y que lo hagamos, digamos, de la manera como lo hacen todos los otros lugares del mundo, ¿no? Y acá tenemos un ejemplo de eso. Por eso es para nosotros muy importante la experiencia australiana. Agradecemos mucho todo este conocimiento de años que en unas cuantas láminas puede parecer, digamos, poco, pero resumen un trabajo de mucha gente y institucional de muchos años, y que hoy día nosotros tenemos el privilegio de tener acceso a él y de poder aprender sobre él y poder ver qué cosa podemos hacer en nuestro país para mejorar al trabajador del sector agrícola peruano. Gracias.
Thanks very much, Sergio. And this is indeed the purpose of this webinar, is to start the conversation and to understand where we're coming from. And we have noted that you have the normas indeed in our initial discussions. We have seen that, and that's an important first step to build on. And you know, I think you are progressing, and maybe things like, you know, the online delivery and the fact of it to be forced online is also an opportunity to even widen the options, the delivery options. Like our colleagues from Sunnytapes have said, in Australia, it actually created a new demand for skills that was not there before, because people who couldn't come face to face to take a course suddenly were able to find time in the evening, you know, in their own time to upskill themselves. And there were new areas suddenly, you know, in the digital economy that people needed to learn. So maybe we can also take that, you know, this tragedy really as an opportunity to provide some more you know, human capital into our countries and to develop people to support them in that transition. So that's another field that we could look into with you. Craig, and any feedback, or Camille, who has joined us? She hasn't spoken yet today, but she is you know, a great and very experienced person, having spent many years in Latin America and talking to partners in Latin America on how Australia can support Latin American training organizations or associations like yourself. So would either of you have any comments on this in this group discussion?
I'll hand over to Camille.
Bueno, entonces, muchas gracias, Sergio, por los comentarios y también por todos los asistentes a esta presentación. Está muy interesante esta oportunidad para haber conocido un poco más del sector en Perú, y también estoy muy emocionada de las probabilidades y oportunidades que tenemos para trabajar conjuntos y seguir compartiendo esa información y experiencias. También, como yo he comentado en el primero y también antes de estas sesiones, que yo soy de la quinta generación de una familia con una propiedad de frutos cítricos. Entonces, esa también con el conocimiento y las cosas que tenemos en Sanitafe, están direccionados también a esa industria. Entonces, yo creo que serán muy buenas las oportunidades para abrir un poco más y sí, estamos muy dispuestos para seguir en ese proceso.
Gracias, muchas gracias. Estamos muy interesados en la experiencia, ya hablando de cítricos, porque yo represento por un lado a GAP, que es el gremio de gremios que involucra a varios cultivos como la uva, la palta, los cítricos, los arándanos, las granadas, las hortalizas, ¿no? Entonces, muchos cultivos, ¿no? Entonces, pero en el caso particular de Procitrus, que estamos orientados al sector de cítricos, sí nos interesa mucho establecer una alianza con la institución que ve temas de cítricos para desarrollar, digamos, productos, digamos, similares, porque, digamos, la citricultura en el mundo es conocida. Entonces, nosotros también estamos haciendo un centro de investigación. Hemos comenzado por nuestros bloques de fundación, que los estamos formando en este momento, y más adelante tendremos también campos demostrativos para hacer investigaciones, y por qué no poder intercambiar experiencia entre ambos países, ¿no? Tanto una vez que termine esta pandemia y que nos permitan movilizarnos en el mundo, poder intercambiar experiencias, ¿no? Tanto en los campos de Australia como en los campos de Perú. Eso sería, digamos, un objetivo que yo tengo en mente y que me gustaría concretar para establecer una relación directa, ¿no? De intercambio de experiencias en procesos productivos en ambos países, ¿no? Nosotros tenemos muchas cosas interesantes para aprender, sobre todo en el tema de manejo fitosanitario, porque tenemos muchos controladores biológicos, tenemos mucha fauna en ese sentido, y tenemos a mucha gente que viene de otros lugares del mundo justamente a ver todo el tema del control biológico, que es algo que nosotros lo hemos impulsado por mucho tiempo. Somos los más grandes criadores de controladores biológicos. Podemos criar a más de 10 especies de controladores biológicos de manera simultánea para diferentes plagas, ¿no? Entonces, ese es un ejemplo de las cosas que podemos compartir mucho con otros países. Y así otras cosas de investigación en temas de cítricos que nos interesan, ¿no? Y en temas del reto que tenemos para formar a los trainers, eso yo se lo mencioné a la persona que nos asesoró, que está participando en este seminario, que es Rosa Carvalho. Mucho gusto, Rosa, ¿cómo estás? Que el gran reto que venía después era formar justamente a esos entrenadores, porque hay que identificarlos y hay que saber también, digamos, sin que dejen de tener ese vínculo con la industria, que nos transmitan todo ese conocimiento y que lo pongan a servicio de otras personas para entrenar. Entonces, eso es importante, sin que ese entrenador pierda ese vínculo con la industria que es el que lo nutre de todo ese conocimiento que tiene. Porque en el Perú, realmente donde se forma o donde se forma la gente es en las industrias. Son grandes centros de formación las industrias, y las industrias grandes tienen inclusive en escuelas de formación. Y digamos, podemos aprovechar de todo eso, ¿no? Hoy en día que tenemos un gran número de trabajadores y de personal experto en las industrias de Perú, ¿no? En todos los cultivos.
No, that's a great comment, Sergio. And we really believe in Australia that the fundamental skill that the trainer, and the value of a trainer is the industry experience. And it's always possible to give them the training skills, but without them knowing what they're talking about, it's harder to do it the other way, to take somebody who doesn't have the experience of their industry and then teach them that. So I'm sure you have lots of very qualified and, very suitable candidates to do excellent trainers, and happy to discuss how to do that with you. We do have a limited amount of time, but we have, scheduled a session to discuss the next steps with you, maybe next week.
Next week, yeah.
Next week. So let's take it to a smaller format, but it was really, really good to have this immediate feedback from you on how, what areas of what we've presented and what we've discussed was of interest. So thank you so much. Also, apologies for the webinar format with you, the participants not being able to express themselves other than through the chat. So, but hopefully, if you have any more, any of the attendees have questions and would like to get in touch with us, they're most welcome to do so as well. On that, let's move to the final session of this webinar, which would be the concluding remarks. And again, concluding for now, but it's only the beginning of a conversation and a collaboration. So I will pass the floor to Craig to close off the webinar, and we look forward to meeting with Sergio and the team, and anybody who is interested and who's not on the screen at the moment to join us in this conversation. So Craig, please, over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Eva, and thank you very much for coordinating this collaboration, and particularly thanks to the team at Sunny TAFE. It's fantastic to see the full range of capability that is exercised and brought together in one institution to not only increase the quality of training, but to make it relevant to the local industry. I should have mentioned also that Sunny TAFE has won the Australian Training Provider of the Year in recognition of the quality of their work and their support for innovation. So there's another big tick for Sunny TAFE, but particularly also to you, Sergio, and Enzo, and others who are online. Really do want to thank you for being open for us to reach out to you and to talk about what are the areas of exchange where we could work together. There is one thing that's very clear to us as a small nation at the bottom of the world, away from large populations, is that we believe strongly in collaboration and trade. And that collaboration and trade depends upon having a world-class industry and world-class people. And I'm sure that's exactly the same for your industry as well, to maintain your position in global trade. So we both have similar objectives in terms of progressing our industries and for the benefit of both of our countries. So we do look forward to maybe traveling one day And it would be fantastic for you to come out and see sunny TAFE, and equally for some sunny TAFE people to head over there. And really what we can do is some capability exchange is what I would talk about around technical aspects of industry, even training, and also training of trainers. So we've got those skill sets, so we do look forward to that. Now we're about to head off into our day, but you're about to head off and have an evening meal and a night off, and we do thank you for spending your time online. And so we do say thank you very much.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you. We're looking forward also for this both direction cooperation, both directions.
Fantastic. Good night. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for Sergio and Emilia, Enzo, Gennaro for your help, and for Gabriel for making this possible. Of course, thank you to the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs to provide the funding to facilitate this initial conversation. And thanks for all the speakers and the attendees for taking the time to be with us today. So we will let you go and finish your day, with your lovely Peruvian meal with lovely Peruvian produce. And we'll start our day on our end, and we look forward to talking to you next week and into the future.
Thank you. Thank you to all. Thank you, Samantha. Thank you, Lara.
Thank you. Thanks for the interpreters. They've done a great job again.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Craig. Bye, Eva.
Bye.
Bye, Camille. See you soon.
Bye-bye.